So
Okay,
you can
so go
you can
back to the
continue for
beginning.
now. Go back to the beginning of the
Okay,
question and
so the question is consistency with spinning, double drive versus flyer lead versus bobbin lead. Um, so with the physics, your most consistent self-regulating system is double drive. Because there is slippage in your drive band, what it means that it is more likely to keep the same amount of twist going into your fiber as the bobbin fills. With flyer lead, as the bobbin fills, the system actually gets more efficient at putting twist in. So that's why often, I know it happened to me when I spun mostly in flyer lead, as you get to the end of your bobbin, you find yourself spinning thinner than you did at the beginning. And that's because naturally when your wheel is giving you more twist, you tend to draft thinner to keep up with it. So double drive has more consistent twist over the course of, and also take up over the course of an entire bobbin. Bobbin lead is also pretty consistent because the bobbin is always providing the same amount of twist, but your take-up changes a lot depending on how full your bobbin is.
so if you adjust, if you're going with flyer lead
Yes.
and you adjust the tension
Mm-hmm.
um, as you go along, you'd still be able to compensate for that, right? Or no?
A little bit. You have to increase the take-up as the bobbin fills.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So it's going to be a pain, but
and it's a pain because on flyer lead, the bobbin break, which is adjusting your take-up, it is a system with slippage. So you don't have as much, like, you have a lot of control with take-up, but not necessarily as much as you want as the bobbin fills. But bobbin lead, your take-up becomes less as the bobbin fills. So that's why sometimes people will make a fat core bobbin for spinning on a bobbin lead wheel to reduce the take-up.
Oh, okay.
And it's a common thing with Scott, like as bobbins fill, take-up gets weaker.
Yeah. So the reason why I ask the extra version is because if we if one of our viewers has a wheel that can't do double drive or can't do um, a bobbin lead,
Yeah.
right? Then
If you've got just a flyer lead wheel, what can you do for consistency?
exactly.
That's my recommendation. Is every time you change something about your wheel, you should check with like a wraps per inch card,
Yeah.
and an angle of twist to make sure that you're still spinning the same diameter and you're spinning with the same amount of twist.
And that's when you say anything, you mean even like
You
changing
change a
hooks.
hook, change the take up the first time you sit down at your wheel for the day.
Yeah.
If you put some oil on it, if you oil your wheel, that's going to change the take up and it's going to change the twist because it changes how efficiently the machine works.
That's generally good advice for anything, even if you're doing double drive, right?
Yeah, but double drive, because of how the system's set
A little
up,
bit more even out.
It's self-regulating.
Okay, so I think we managed everything with the audio.
Yeah, so that's my argument for spin and double drive. If you're not spinning in double drive, use something like a control card, a plyback sample to make sure that you're spinning the same throughout the entire bobbin. And then the second question, let me think. Did I finish? Oh yeah, and then for plying, I usually ply, well, before I got my aura, I plied in flyer lead because you can do a better job with take-up. I could never get double drive to give enough take-up for plying. But when you're plying, you can keep an eye on that twist and how it's going in much better because there's a visual representation of that twist that you see right in front of you before it goes on the bobbin. So you can make sure that that twist is the same. And you might find when you're getting closer to the end of the bobbin, your plying goes faster.
Yeah.
So plying is not as needy for consistency. Just pay attention to your angle of twist. Okay, and then the second question was somebody asking about, well, what do you do about combining fibers that are two drastically different staple lengths?
Hmm.
So say
Well,
you
can I guess?
what?
Because I think I know the answers because you've taught me.
What?
Is that when you spin from the fold?
You got it.
All right. Yeah. So the basically you can take the staples.
I'm gonna find some fiber.
Yeah. Get some examples. You take the staples, and so when you have something that is a longer staple fiber, you can fold it over, and when you spin it from there, the shorter staple length stuff stays the shorter staple length, but the longer staple length gets folded over, sort of matches up the end staple length, right? Is that something with silk and
This
something
is
else?
Rockefeller. So this is yak and silk and camel and
That's a perfect example.
merino. So if you haven't seen spinning from the fold, I don't have a wheel, but I do have a finger. I mean, I've got support spindles nearby, but so you take off
Literally
like a
fold it
staple
over.
length. This is more than a staple length, but this is about as long of a chunk you want to do. And I fold it over. I spin with my right hand in control of drafting. If you spin with your left hand, you do it on the other hand, whatever your fiber supply hand is. And then you kind of fold it, and you basically are spinning from the side and forming your drafting triangle that way. And so what this does is it kind of folds your fibers in half. And so the discrepancy in staple length isn't as much. It kind of approximates a carded prep by mixing up the fibers. And so you're a lot less likely to grab just the yak or just the silk. So like silk in this is the problem. A lot of blends with especially mulberry silk benefit from being spun from the fold because sometimes they actually, so mulberry silk is a single filament from the cocoon of a silkworm, and a specific one that feeds on mulberries. And so it's a single long filament. To make comb top from it, they actually do cut the filament, but it's not always consistent how long that is, what that staple length is. So there can be some variation, and that's what can cause spinning things with mulberry silk or spinning mulberry silk by itself a little bit harder.
Well, you're going down a rabbit hole. Let's
Yeah,
come back
I
up.
know. So you just pull out from here and keep pulling, and you'll just be slowly pulling across your folded piece of fiber until it's all gone, and then you get really good at making joins, and you add the next staple length.
Yeah, and this is good not just for combo spins that you're blending yourself, but if you find something where you get you're spinning along and you get a big slub of something, silk or nylon or something that's coming out of it, try spinning from the fold, and you're going to end up where, again, the longer staple length stuff is going to fold in half and get a little bit shorter. It does end up with more color mixing, though, right?
No.
No, sorry.
Less
Correct
color
me on that.
mixing because, well, it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing like a comb top that has all the multiple colors laying parallel to each other, not hand dyed, but like the mill process stuff, you can actually reduce the color mixing by spinning basically one color at a time.
Okay, yeah. So spinning from the fold is also beneficial for reducing color mixing. If
but
you
it
wanna
does
spin
give
from the
you
tip,
kind of
it mixes
a
better.
woolen type prep. So it's more like carded. So if you're going to do that for part of your spin, you should do everything like that. You shouldn't switch between spinning from the fold and then spinning regular comb top from the tip.
Okay.
It'll change your grist and the density because you're going to get more air in the fiber for spinning from the fold.
So maybe I'll ask the question for the viewers that don't necessarily know the difference between woolen and worsted spinning.
Okay.
Right? We hear woolen and worsted in terms of yarn, right? If you come from the knitting world or crochet world specifically,
Worsted is a weight.
is a weight,
Woolen,
not
you
a
don't.
type of spin. And
Yeah.
woolen, you just think, oh, warm, fluffy woolens. That's what
Yeah.
keeps me warm at night, right? So what
So
does that mean for spinning?
there's worsted prep and there's woolen prep. So worsted prep is combed top, so all the fibers are parallel to each other. Carded prep or woolen prep, the fibers are not all neatly.
They're mixed.
They're mixed. That's usually done through either hand cards or a drum card or a blending board, something like that. And then you have worsted spinning versus woolen spinning. Worsted is you're spinning out, your hands are not ever going more than a staple length apart. And you either spin forward or you spin back. You kind of, it's the inchworm is what most people think of, is worsted spinning. Woolen.
And you end up with a more dense,
compacted
single.
Yes, compacted, but finer, usually more uniform in size. You have a little bit more control. Woolen is what's called long draw. And my main thing is your hands are farther than a staple length apart, because it means that twist is allowed to get into the fiber supply.
But then because you're not sticking your fingers on every, inch of space, it has a lot more air inside of it. So the end result is that the single and the final yarn is airier. It actually is warmer.
More insulating.
It's more insulating, but it's weaker.
Not as durable, because there's usually not as much twist in those woolen spun singles.
Yeah. Cool. So which is terrible for mnemonics, all of this, because in worsted knitting, the yarn is thicker, but in worsted spinning type, it's thinner and more compact.
Typically, yes.
Yeah. So, nobody said we were consistent, guys.
But this is all about consistency.
True. All right, you got me.
Okay, so those are the questions I've gotten on Rav. So I know we have some people with us. Does anybody have a question? Otherwise, I'm just going to start talking about stuff.
What have you been doing for your combo spin?
I wasn't going to do one this time because I've done a couple, and I should have gone and grabbed my resulting sweater from the last mashup or brought some examples.
Yeah.
I guess I'll do that next time.
No, we're totally winging this episode.
Yeah. I wasn't going to, but then a whole bunch of friends and I were chatting today, and they were chatting about putting together advent calendars, fiber advent calendars, and stuff like the Base 12 spin along, which the Base 12 spin along is now available for pre-order at HipStrings.com. And the Base 12 spin along is a mashup in my style because it's taking 3 different preps. It uses hand-dyed comb top, it does mill process comb top, and it does hand-carded bats.
Wait. So we are doing a mashup spin-along here for just whatever.
Yeah.
And then in a month or two,
you're going to get like a 2-week break and do another one.
Right.
Because this is how I do my fiber life now. This is how I approach every fiber project.
In hard mode?
No. It's treating my fiber stash like a painter's palette.
There you go.
A little bit A, a little bit B, like this. I have a vision for what I want the final thing to be. And that's not always something I can buy off the shelf.
We have a question finally.
Yes.
From the Mitten on Knittin'. What if you had 3 fibers like Jacob, Yak, and Silk? Would spinning from the fold work there too?
Yes, because they're just because the Jacob is a medium wool. Spinning from the fold or doing a carded prep would negate the staple length differences between those fibers. So carding lets you mix things that shouldn't necessarily be mixed. Mixing staple lengths is always going to make drafting a little bit trickier. But it'll be better if you can long draw it versus worsted. Because if you're doing like a short forward draw, you're more likely to pull out just one of those fibers at a time, and leave the other stuff behind in your fiber supply. And so you get a length of Jacob, and then a length of yak, and a length of silk, and those all need very different twist. But if you're spinning them all at the same time, it kind of averages it all out and has its own kind of sort of magic.
Kind of sort of magic. I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, but you would need to make sure that you have enough twist for the thinnest or for the shortest staple length.
No.
No.
It's
Okay.
it's an average.
Okay.
Because the things get in each other's way.
That's if you're spinning from the fold, or
Yeah, if you're spinning from the fold or from a carded prep, the other fibers get in the way.
Yeah.
And that changes the amount of twist that the overall fiber needs. So like a merino silk needs a different amount of twist than spinning just merino.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
So back to mashup plans.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, I apologize for the sound issues before. I'm watching the concurrent viewers, and I watch it come up and then down, and then up and then down. I think people are hearing the sound issues and then dropping out, and so I think we're gonna have to cut the beginning of the video out.
We can edit the beginning of the video. So friends were talking about Advent fiber calendar spins, and those are basically always mashups. Especially if you're like doing it yourself. And so I was like, oh, I really want to. I didn't want to like commit to a whole nother sweater quantity spin because I have shows for like the first time in a year and a half.
Well, we'll talk about that in a second, but finish your story.
But it means life's a little bit busier than usual. But I think I'm going to put together a small like baby mashup, maybe just like 8 ounces.
For a baby sweater?
No. Maybe for like a hat.
Okay.
Would that be like a 4-ounce mashup?
Hats for both of us?
Hats for both of us?
All right.
Something. 8 ounces is a good size. So I think I'm going to put together one. I might do it during the next live stream. It won't take me that long to spin 8 ounces.
Okay, perfect. I mean, yeah, we can demonstrate. We have a follow-up question, by the way, from the Mitten on Knittin'. If you do that, do you have to consider the crimp of each type of fiber when you choose what to mix? So you're looking at the crimp as well.
So
let's pull that question back a little bit more, because now we're getting into areas that I have no knowledge of.
Oh, but I talk about crimp in the article. So
okay. Well, I'm going to ask first off,
what is crimp?
What does crimp have to do with how you spin it? Because I know that there's stuff that looks like the French fries and it's all pretty in the fleece, but as far as I can tell, once I spin it, it doesn't make a difference.
Okay,
does
so yes, it does.
All right.
The more crimp that a fiber has, the more twist it needs to lock.
Okay. Why is that? Sorry to put you on the spot there. I mean, is the crimp indicative of how the scales
Think about
are?
Velcro.
And,
If you have really fine Velcro, you need a larger surface to have a strong.
Okay.
The strongest Velcro is the one with the biggest, like,
the big
barbs.
knobs and
Yeah.
Okay.
It's that way with crimp.
Okay.
So things with a lot of crimp
Mm-hmm.
tend to have a lot more air and are squishy.
Mm-hmm.
So like Targhee and Rambouillet and those are fibers that have a lot of crimp, and like Cormo.
So they don't need as much twist?
They need they need a lot of twist.
They need more twist.
They'll take, like, Rambouillet will absorb so much twist.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. I love spinning it because it absorbs so much twist, and I'm used to spinning with a lot of twist.
Yeah.
But like something that's a long wool that has a nice, like, it's like wavy hair.
Yeah.
That doesn't have a lot of crimp, and it requires very little twist to actually keep it together.
Okay.
There's usually kind of a relationship with short staple lengths are usually crimpier.
Okay.
And then longer staple lengths are less crimp. Those kind of usually go together.
Yeah.
So that's also, if something's longer, you don't need as much twist because it has more surface area grabbing onto the things along with it.
I gotcha. Okay.
There's more contact. Okay. So crimp, it makes it harder for the things to connect to each other.
Okay.
Think
All
about
right.
Okay.
So then, going back to the question of, do you have to consider the crimp when you mix things together?
So if you blend things really well, then you don't need to worry about crimp.
All right, that is the most ambiguous statement I've ever heard. What does it mean to blend them well? Like lots of blending and
Yeah.
lots of mixing? Okay, all right.
So you want to not be able, when you look at your fiber prep, you want to not be able to distinguish between the
Okay.
different fibers.
Okay. So, like what you have here, you know, is not what you're talking about, where you can actually identify the different fibers. It
Right,
has
because
to be,
that's going to end up having slubs
yeah.
because the individual fibers are going to come out.
So it has to be blended to the point where you cannot tell what
Right.
it's made of.
But like my fiber blend buoy,
Mhm.
it's BFL, Shetland, and Manx. They all are similar staple length, but very different crimp style.
Mhm.
And because there's kind of that disorganized crimp, it traps a lot more air.
Mhm.
And that's why buoy is so kind of lightweight
It's so buoyant.
compared to a yarn that would be 100% BFL or 100% Manx or even 100% Shetland.
Yeah.
Disorganized crimp adds loftiness. Things that don't necessarily seem like they make sense, but they totally work.
No, it makes complete sense, right? It's the if I have a bunch of sheets of paper and I lay it down into a thick, heavy ream of paper, or if I take each individual paper and crumple them up and then put them in the stack, I've got something huge.
Yeah.
And it's light and airy, and I can run through it.
Yeah.
And that sounds really fun. We should do that.
But it also works for like taking wools that are super crimpy and almost too crimpy and take too much twist, like Targhee and Rambouillet. If you mix them with a little bit of silk or viscose, like the Targhee bamboo silk I sell.
Yeah.
The Targhee bamboo silk is much easier to spin than the Targhee by itself.
Yeah.
And it's because of that little touch of silk, which doesn't have as much crimp.
Yeah.
So silk acts as grease when you're spinning.
All right. Just like butter is food lubricant.
Yes.
As Gabriella would say.
Silk is fiber lubricant.
All right. Cool. By the way, Hollis and Stav says this is just how all life is now. I don't know if they're referring to the fact that we're just winging it, or if the fact that people are jumping in and out because of our sound issues. But, we'll take it. Yeah, life is strange. All right, cool. Let's see. What else? Is there anything?
Do you have
the
questions?
shows.
You want to talk about shows?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about your show first, and then I'll talk about my show?
Okay, so the next upcoming show is
just the hour show and the hour show, but you know what I mean.
We'll be at Shenandoah Valley Fiber Festival in Berryville, Virginia. We're very excited because it's our biggest show of the year, always, and well, it hasn't happened for a while.
Well, it's definitely going to be our biggest show. Well, maybe not. I don't know.
We'll see.
Fighting Indies,
but we're outside, double booth. We bring all the goodies, or at least what I can fit in the trailer.
Yeah.
And so prepping for that, and there will be goodies at shows that will not see the light of the internet.
The light of the internet.
Because I cleaned out a studio this past year and found all sorts of goodies.
Yeah, so lots of leftovers?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I've been thinking of what I need to pull out of the cupboards to specials of things that people don't think exists anymore. There might be some buoy samplers and some discontinued yarns and stuff like that.
Right.
And then 2 weeks later,
we have Indie Knit and Spin. Yeah, we're actually going forward with it. We're doing it. We're at Nova Place in Pittsburgh. It's kind of like outdoors, actually, but it's indoors. So you won't get rained on, but there's still going to be enough airflow. We're also doing something kind of weird that everybody's going to complain and say, you know, why the hell are you doing this? But it works out really well. Our booths are not the typical like 10 by 10 booths. They are going to be 6 foot by something. We've got different sizes, 6 by 6, 6 by 12, 6 by 18, and we actually were forced to do that once. And quite frankly, it's our favorite booth configuration because people don't get locked into the booth. You can walk by and easily see everything. It's just fantastic. And so, from the standpoint of COVID, you don't have people crammed into a small space. So we think in terms of airflow, in terms of people flow, it's going to work a lot better. So if you're in the Pittsburgh area, October 9th,
Yes.
yes. By all means, definitely stop by. We're going to try again. Our number one concern is making sure that our everybody. I was going to say our
Yeah.
attendees and our
Everybody is
members,
safe.
but just everybody is safe. We're doing everything we possibly can. We're going to require masking. We're going to we'll say this right now. We encourage everybody to get vaccinated. You still have time to get fully vaccinated by then. And absolutely, we really want to be able to see people in person again. So definitely stop by.
Okay. So we've given people a chance to ask another question.
Yes, we have another question.
So you wouldn't be able to get color differences if you use things with different crimp or staple length. And yes, that is kind of the trade-off.
Well, in terms of staple length, you already said you can get better color differences, but that's only if you're talking about color across the length. If you're talking about color from one fiber to the next, it'll all blend together.
It will blend.
Yeah. Okay.
You're more likely to pull out things. Yes.
Yeah.
So because you want disorganization, chaos is your friend when trying to get things to play along that don't naturally want to play along.
Chaos is brown, unfortunately.
Yes. I'm thinking about something.
Share with the class.
That's what I'm trying. I'm trying to get from my brain to my mouth. There are some cases where you can use dissimilar fibers to do color separation, but realize that that's not going to contribute to consistency. So it's a thing I do in some of my blends where I want more color separation. I will use what I call a slippy fiber. So stuff like viscoses, silk, to create pops of color because they won't blend as well with wool. They won't, which also is why they don't want to draft as well. So if you don't blend them that well, they will separate when you're spinning and give you a color pop, but that's not necessarily going to result in a consistent yarn.
Yeah, so I mean,
so it'll look good.
So that's an interesting
point. It's a trade-off. Right?
Everything we've talked about up to this point is about getting a consistent, uniform combo blend.
Mm-hmm.
What if you don't care? What if you're making an art yarn and you want those slubs and you want those pops of color? And
well, then you can do things like purposely put in things of different staple lengths.
Right. Well, and this is how you get the tweediness and things like that, right?
Yeah, without it turning into mud.
Yeah.
Because using dissimilar fiber types will create the colors won't blend. You'll have pops instead of blending.
Yeah. And so that might lead into another point in general of, this is not only about creating something, but it's about learning, right?
Yeah.
It's about getting that experience of how do you blend things together, and we can give you some level of guidance, but there's only so many hours in the day that you can do your own experimentation, so everybody needs to do their own experimentation as well.
Yeah,
right?
Because like one thing I talk about in the article is about how spinners naturally start to group fibers together as things that spin like something else. So like it's kind of forming natural groups based on how you spin of things that are going to spin like each other. And the thing is, you can take that individual, okay, I've spun 100% Targhee and 100% Rambouillet and 100% Falkland, and they all tend to spin up to the same yarn for me. That means that if I want to do something like a combo spin where I'm spinning chunks in series, one after another, I can combine Targhee and Falkland and Polworth and Rambouillet all into the same yarn, because since I spin them the same on their own, when I spin them in series, they're still going to be similar enough to have the same yarn at the end.
Because your single is then going to combine, as long as the single is consistent, then the plies are going to consistently come together.
Right, because you naturally spin yarn a certain way based on staple length and crimp. And so you naturally, even if you aren't pulling apart comb top and looking at the crimp and looking at the staple length, your hands are figuring that out for you when you spin.
Your hands are smarter than you give them credit for.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got a really weird concept here that maybe I'm going too deep into science fiction land or something. I realize you've got fiber hanging from your hair.
I have fiber everywhere. There's fiber on my mic. I was dividing silks today, so I'm just coated.
So let's say we take a couple of things that we spin similarly in series, but they've got different crimp, right?
You're unlikely to have spun them similarly.
Okay, so you're saying things that you are going to spin similarly have the same basic properties. They got the same staple length, they got the same crimp, they've got this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say I ignore that part of the advice.
Yeah.
Let's say I take the control card and I spin, and I'm doing something in series where I take multiple fibers that I spin in series, and I'll end up where the single is the same in each of these segments.
You also need to check your angle of twist.
Right. So do you want to talk about checking angle of twist for the single as well?
Yeah, well, you do a plyback sample and check the angle of twist.
There you go. And so that's sort of the point I was building to in my head, right? That when you end up spinning the same single, if the fibers are too distinctly different, they're going to have different angles of twist.
Yes.
Even though you have the same single, right? So there's all of these things that kind of blend together where if you don't blend them, once you get to the point of doing the plies, you're going to be in a world of hurt.
Right. And so this is actually what happened with my first like kind of mashup spin.
Yeah.
Was I got a pack of like bits and bobs from a dyer, and it wasn't, the fiber type wasn't labeled. It was just a bunch of different things. And I was like, oh, I'm going to use this to spin just a fun yarn. And I spun my singles, and, every now and then there'd be a little chunk and I'd have a harder time spinning it like everything else. And it was because like there was suddenly a chunk of Wensleydale in there amongst like the Polworth. And then when I got to plying, then I discovered, oh, like this section that was the Wensleydale is way overspun compared to everything else. So my plying's all messed up here. The yarn's not balanced here. It's overspun here. It doesn't have enough twist there. Because I was just spinning bits of comb top in series. And because they weren't similar in staple length or crimp, like my twist was all over the board.
I'm sure that makes something that looks really, really cool, but it's not consistent.
It was not nice. It wasn't even one of my favorite. It's in one of my favorite giant shawls.
Yeah.
But I am not happy with that yarn. It was not nice to knit with. And so that's when I started developing this. Well, how do you actually combine fibers? How do you pick things? Because I've seen other people's methods for doing combo spins, and they're just like, well, pick anything. Colors that, focus on colors that you like go together. And I'm just like, but that's not necessarily going to work. It might look nice, but it's not going to be a good yarn necessarily.
So we get another question probably along the same lines from the Mitten on Knitting. So you would use like a Rambo, Targhee, and Polworth and blend them because you spin them the same, but the dye take-up is different to give the depth of color? Or why bother to blend what comes out the same? I'm missing something.
Okay. So why would I use something like Rainbow Target and Polar? I'm not. That's kind of an example of when I've got that stuff in my stash, and I'm trying to combine different braids to create a larger project that I don't have enough just Rainbow Lay for. But because those fibers spin all the same for me, I don't need to blend them any further. I can take them as is, divide them into like staple lengths, or about 1/4 of an ounce each, which is what I naturally pull apart braids to. And just what I call spinning in series. You spin one chunk and then you make a join and you spin the nut. And it's like the least fiber prep necessary to combine stuff to make a consistent yarn. It's when you start changing things like staple length or crimp, the more dissimilar your fibers are, the more you have to blend them in order to create a consistent yarn.
So actually, I don't think you're missing anything. I think you got exactly the point,
Yeah.
right? So if they are something that you spin the same, then go for it. Spin it in series. It should be good. You could, I mean, I guess you could even put them next to each other and spin them from the tip.
You can
together,
do combo
right?
drafting if you want to play with colors that way. You can have 2 plies that are one blend, one fiber, and one that's another.
Yeah.
But you might not want to do that if your crimp's different, but
then if you have something that you end up spinning very differently, and that just from your natural spin, they're going to come out at different thicknesses or a different angle of twists, then you have to add the blending in portions. So don't worry, I think you got it. But definitely keep asking questions. Okay. So then Hollis and Struve, I apologize for my inability to say names. What happens when you have, say, 3 different breeds, each spun to a different bobbin and then plied together?
So
a mess.
Yeah. People talk about doing this all the time, and I almost always think it's a bad idea. And the reason why I think it's a bad idea is that you are going to have probably slight differences in crimp. And you might have slight differences in angle of twist. And what that ends up doing when you ply means that they're not necessarily going to sit next to each other really nicely.
Yeah.
And then when you finish the yarn, one might have more poofage and shrink up more than the other.
Yeah. I can give a fantastic example from science.
Okay.
And engineering.
Okay.
Right? Stay with me. I'm going to teach you something. So this is something that I thought was absolutely amazing when I first learned about it. So old thermostats, not the ones with the mercury, not the ones with the digital sensors or anything like that. Old thermostats actually depended on something that was kind of like this property we're talking about. You take 2 metals that are different and you bond them together, and you have to make sure that they have different, what are called thermal coefficients of expansion. All right, so I'm going real deep here. Stay with me. Thermal coefficient of expansion. It means when I heat up, let's say, a piece of copper, it expands, right? We know things when they heat up, they expand. You heat up water, it takes more space, etc., right? So you heat up like copper, it'll expand. Well, something different, like aluminum, is going to expand at a different rate. So what happens is when you put them together, the one that expands more is going to cause things to bend. And in old thermostats, that's exactly what happened. You got to a point where the temperature, they actually, it wasn't just a small piece, it's a big coil that goes around and around and around. And you set it so that at the temperature you're looking for, it will cause everything to bend and make an electrical connection at the temperature that you set. Because the room temperature got to that point, causes the longer expanding metal to expand more and make that connection to that point. So you're going to have the same problem with the fiber. Yeah, it might look okay when you spin it, and then it's going to have that little bit of expansion from when you wash it and when you whack it and everything. And so you'll end up with this weird wavy yarn, which if you're going for an art yarn, more power to you, but you're not going to have that consistent.
Yeah, the more you can mix it up, the earlier on in the process, the less you're going to, the more chaos, the less you're going to notice that difference in the end.
New thermostats are boring. They just got an electronic sensor. I mean, they're kind of fun from the silicon standpoint, but that's a deeper story for
Yeah.
this. But yeah, so I won't say you'll have a bad time spinning, applying 3 different breeds together. If they spin the same for you, then it'll probably be okay.
Yeah,
right?
But I wouldn't do like a strand of BFL and a strand of merino.
And a strand of cotton.
Yeah.
You're going to have a bad day.
Yeah, you're going to have a bad day. If you want to like blend alpaca and some wool so that it doesn't, lose its shape.
Well, alpaca's just a different beast in itself.
Blend it together.
Well, alpaca's just going to stretch out to whatever it wants.
Yeah, but a 50-50 wool alpaca blend is really nice.
Yeah, but if what I'm saying is if you have a strand of alpaca, a single of alpaca, and a single of something else, it's not going to
end out well.
I kind of want to do it just to see what happens.
All right. Yeah, they've done this. They have a ply of Corriedale, a ply of Falkland, and it's fun, but not, but weird.
Yeah, that was Kathleen Fry. And the quote specifically is fun, but definitely weird.
Yes. So
you got to read what it says. So the mitten on knitting. So it would be more consistent to blend cashmere and alpaca and then spin instead of spin each then ply.
Yes. And a cashmere and alpaca blend would actually be really lovely.
Oh my God, it would fall apart if you looked at it wrong, but.
Well, it would need a lot of twist.
Yeah.
But it'd be really lovely because they're both more like the camelid fiber is more similar to cashmere than wool.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. We've gotten more people who've gone through our sound problems. So
oh,
I'm
good.
Happy about that.
Maybe they're reading through the chat and realizing that we made things better.
Hopefully. I'm so sorry. I'm embarrassed. As an electrical engineer, that is like, oh.
Yes, but you're not an audiovisual engineer.
Yeah, but people don't know the difference. It's like when your relatives were seeing the old Budweiser commercial with the Christmas lights flashing,
totally what you
flashing to the music, and they're like, "That's what you do, right?" Yeah, it's no. Cool. Yeah. So again, if you're going for something fun and interesting, like Kathleen says, right? Yeah, you could do all sorts of crazy things.
If you want a textured yarn.
Yeah. I mean, like.
Sometimes you break the rules on purpose.
Exactly. You know what? One of the things that I always tell people who we're teaching how to spin, they start off and they end up with this super thick yarn. And I say, enjoy it. Because once you get the handle of it, you're never going to spin that thick again. It's going to be so hard to go back to spinning thick. And it's true. I mean, you start getting thinner and thinner and thinner. I was spinning dental floss the other day with an amazing blend, and I was just like, I can't spin this thicker. I want to, because
the beginning of my bobbin was worse. To spin a thicker, and spinning a consistent thick single for me is a lot harder than spinning lace weight.
So if you're doing this experimentation and it doesn't quite work out how you intend it, learn from it, enjoy it.
Yeah, I have this information because, oh gosh, I don't even know what the number is now. I think it's over 150. It might be close to 200 now. So part of HipStrings is I develop new blends, and I spin an ounce of everything that comes in. At least an ounce of everything that comes in. And then we won't talk about like my experimentations with the drum carder and hackles and stuff. But I think I'm getting close to the 200 blend mark. And that's a lot of experience of knowing what goes well together and what doesn't. And
from failure.
Because,
and success.
Yeah, and success. And so I because I have all that experience, I kind of can know how to get effects that I want now.
Yeah.
I can make a yarn, I can make a fiber prep on purpose that is going to slub and have texture, but not too much texture.
Which was wonderful from the last base 12.
Yeah.
Super fun.
Or if I want to make something that is going to have a whole bunch of color separation, I know how to achieve that.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just from experience. And I used to spin a lot of single breed stuff. I rarely spin 100% anything anymore except for cotton. I like all my woolen blends.
So, this podcast, we focused a lot on how to be consistent and how to do a consistent blend. We talked a little bit about what happens when you don't do that. I'm not gonna force you into it, but maybe one thing we want to do for a future podcast, maybe the next one, maybe some other one, is how do you get that art yarn look? How do you get
an art yarn look while making a fiber prep that is still spinnable? Yeah. That's kind of a mission in my life now.
Good. All right.
Because I've had so many art bats come into my life that I've had to completely redo because they weren't spinnable.
Well,
they were spinnable, but it wasn't fun.
And then you get into the whole, well, now I have an art yarn. What do I do with it? That's another podcast right there.
Well, we have products for that.
Yeah. Well, exactly. That's why
yeah.
On the same page. All right. We'll continue to stall for a little bit longer just to see if anybody has more questions. I honestly didn't think we'd get to an hour of this.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
I could talk for days, but it helps when people ask me questions.
Yeah. No,
because I don't want to bore people.
Thank you very much for the questions so far. It's been great. It's been entertaining, and thank you for dealing with the. I'll apologize probably about 3 more times for the sound issues. We got to go back and see how bad it is so that we can.
No, we're just gonna snip it.
We're just gonna cut it. Yeah. We got to hear where it ends.
Yeah.
But then people aren't gonna get our intro, so we should do our intro right now. Hi, I'm Nick.
I'm Chill.
And we're HipStrings. There you go. Now you guys have it. All right. So no more questions.
If you come up with anything, track me down on the internet.
Yep.
Or in person.
At Shenandoah.
At Shenandoah.
Yeah. Or at Any Knit and Spin.
You
can check out information for both of those.
Yeah, because I'll probably do the next live stream in October after Indie Knit and Spin.
Oh. Well, they can still ask you questions at Indie Knit and Spin.
Well, yeah. So they can ask me questions at Indie Knit and Spin, and I'll answer them on the next live stream.
Should we do like a video like at Indie Knit and Spin of like people asking the questions or something?
No.
Okay.
No. So you can find me as HipStrings on Instagram, Ravelry, Facebook, and the email is shop@hipstrings.com. Don't mind the subliminal messaging.
Yeah, and you can email me actually either through Jill or at indieknitandspin at gmail.com. Yeah, just Indie Knit and Spin all together. You can also go to indieknitandspin.com and check out all the vendors that we have listed there. And with that, I think Knittin' on Knittin' has the fantastic idea of the next step. Well, now I have to go play with my stash.
And I'm going to go play with my stash too. And I will put together a mashup and walk you through my decision process.
And I'm going to go grow a stash. No, not really.
That's November. Well, that's November.
Well, I'm going to grow more than a stash. It'll be a beard.
Okay.
But stash part.
Don't just start with the stash.
Just the stash?
No.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have a dad joke?
I do. To the person who invented the number 0, thanks for nothing.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.